You're listening to Podketeers.
Welcome to episode 288 of Podketeers. This is the final episode of 2019, the final episode of the decade. And in this episode, we recap all of the Armchair Imagineering episodes of 2019. We had a bunch of great ideas and some that, well, weren't. But hey, it's blue sky, right? We didn't talk much about this in the episode, but all of the other episodes throughout each month have been a lot of work, a lot of research, but I think I speak for all of us when I say that it's been very rewarding to provide something that we hope is fun to listen to and that maybe it teaches you something along the way. We're really looking forward to continuing, that type of format and those types of episodes in 2020. Before we jump in, although I mentioned some of this on the podcast, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. It really means a lot to us that you take time out of your day to listen to us and to support us, interact with us, and recommend us to others. It's been a great year with a lot of growth for the podcast, and that couldn't have happened without you. And of course, a very special thank you, as always, has to go out to our podcast Fairy Godparents, the FGP Squad, because it's their monthly support via Patreon that has played a really big role in helping make these episodes possible. So I just want to extend our gratitude to all of you and tell you that we appreciate all of the support that you give us in whatever way you do it, whether it's using our Amazon link, just simply telling somebody about the podcast. It doesn't matter. It all collectively helps us grow, and we're very appreciative of that. So thank you. I think it's time to jump in. It's a long episode because we had a lot to go over. So regardless of the holiday that you celebrate, I hope that you're having a wonderful time with friends and family. And cheers to a wonderful new year. Cheers to 2020. So let's get it started. Here is episode 288 of Podketeers. Y'all ready for this?
This is where we needed video.
Because of my world-class head bopping?
Yeah.
Well, I figured that that's a song that Gavin's familiar with because they play it at the round ball going through the circle thing arenas.
Yeah.
What's it called? Basketball?
It's called hoops.
Hoops. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I know that that's a song they play, and then people burst through paper, and then they start posing, and then there's pictures.
This might be high school basketball that you're referring to.
What?
I think so.
I think I'm out of the sports game, so to speak.
I don't think LeBron crashed through a piece of paper since he was about 17 years old.
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
I don't believe it. It seems like something he would do on a regular basis.
Maybe in his driveway with his kids.
He's like, I'm LeBron James. Get that paper up for me. That's how it works. Sports, athletes, and stuffs.
Yep. It's like you're an expert.
That's right. So this is the last episode of the year.
Yep.
I know.
This
It's all come down to this.
The Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year episode, because although we're going to be recording the next episode in 2019, it's going to be released on the very first day of 2020, a brand new decade. And I'm pretty excited about next year. There's a lot of changes coming. There's a lot of personal improvement changes that are happening, and it's good. I'm looking forward to it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe 2019 is already over.
Yeah, this
Right?
decade, man.
Yeah.
What a crazy, crazy time. Although I am thinking about next year, I think in my head, all I keep thinking is, does your heart hold the magic of the holidays? Is it filled with warm memories, just waiting to be discovered again? Well, now is the time to open your heart and believe in that magic. And remember those treasured moments. Oh, they're still there, deep within you, waiting to touch you once more. So come along as the magic of the season leads the way. Can you remember how Christmas makes you feel? That special... Come on! Come
I
on,
don't know
nobody...
what this is.
You were perfect on yourself by yourself.
Yeah, we were just letting you go on your own little journey
Right.
there. I don't know what that is, though.
Are you... Seriously?
Yeah, what is that?
That's from the Disneyland fireworks.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen the holiday fireworks.
Yeah, it's my favorite time of year, man. And Disneyland decided to kick me out the joint.
Ah. I think we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, we are.
It's okay. I'll just sit here and be like, remember the caring, a season worth sharing. Believe in the magic of our lives. Just open up your heart.
See, what we would be doing is getting the snow ready.
Yeah, there you go. See,
We would be
fireworks are
making
going
like
off.
the bubbles and everything. We'd be the backup.
We should do a YouTube video next year when we're blocked out again, and we'll do that version. We'll
It's
find a
just like
main
being
street.
there.
We'll find a main street somewhere because they're all over the place. And then we'll take a little video of that main street, maybe in Anaheim. And then, like you said, we'll get some bubbles. Gavin will stand in the background and basically beatbox the fireworks. And I'll
There we
just
go.
run around singing in the bubble stream.
I feel
Oh, that's
magical
funny.
already.
That is funny. Okay, well, this is going to be a really good episode because we're going to get a chance to recap basically every single Armchair Imagineering episode that we've done in 2019. This has been such a fun concept. You know, we had done Armchair Imagineering before, but it just kind of came up here and there. I think we did maybe 2 or 3 episodes, maybe 2. I don't remember. But the point is that it wasn't as consistent as we did it this year. So when Gavin brought up the concept at the end of last year and said, hey, we should do this. Oh, man, I didn't realize how fun and how stressful and how much I was going to hate Gavin on some months for picking certain topics.
So
But
this
you know
is
what?
this is the episode where you guys present me with my championship trophy, right?
I mean, look, we tallied up all the votes, and I'm sorry to tell you,
What?
you didn't
Uh-oh.
win, buddy.
This is a travesty.
It's hogwash, I say.
Something's rigged.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I wanted to get some feedback from listeners as far as like what their favorite Armchair Imagineering episodes were so that we could talk about them in this podcast. And we did get some responses. We'll talk about them later on in the episode. But then FGP Squad member Anita kind of summed it up. And I wasn't really thinking straight when I posted it, but she says, "Oh man, there's so many. You're going to have to remind me about them." And I thought, that
Yeah.
even applies to me because even I don't remember all of them.
Right?
So I think we're going to repost the same question after this episode goes up, and it'll be interesting to hear, you know, what stands out the most for some of our listeners, and we'll talk about it in the next episode, obviously. We did, like I said, we did get some feedback on some of them, and we'll touch on a couple of those later in the episode, but I think it's time to get started because we got 12 months of podcasts to go over, guys.
Bring it.
Let's see. I don't even think I remember much.
Well, so I took notes this past week. I was re-listening to the episodes. I took some notes, and I'll give you just a few words to kind of recall what the main ideas of those episodes were. I don't think I'm going to touch on every single idea because let's face it, there were some things that we said that maybe should never have been said. And others that we would like to remind Disney that they owe us money for. And
Yeah.
others where we're going to be like, Rebecca Campbell, this is where you should be listening. Yeah. I don't remember if that was the same jingle that we used the last time.
No, but I like that one.
but I figured it had to be inserted somewhere. So let's go all the way back to January, and let's talk about Tomorrowland, where we armchaired Imagineered in episode 241. Now, in that episode, the top 3 ideas that we had was Gavin wanted to give us Flynn's user gateway. Melissa wanted to give us a Meet the Robinson style attraction and restaurant.
That's right.
And then I wanted to just rejigger all of Interventions and turn it into the Axiom in a very Void style attraction. A dark ride and stuff. So that's also the episode where Gavin tried to make Fetch happen, and it just didn't happen, but that's okay. We love him anyway. All right.
That's hilarious.
So where do we want to start with this? Because there's so much we can talk about. How do you want to approach this?
I mean, I just kind of wanted to walk down memory lane, so to speak, and talk about the things that we still like think about and are like, yeah, that's a great idea. I think Tomorrowland was an epic place for us to start because, we all have big ideas about Tomorrowland, and it is one of the lands that is about big ideas. And I feel like an overhaul of Tomorrowland presents probably the biggest challenges of any land in Disneyland proper. So the fact that we all came up with mega e-ticket retheming of certain areas or even the whole land itself was a great start for us. I thought it set a really good tone and a good foundation for the rest of our Armchair Imagineering episodes. And, I think that was probably our best battle royale, is that very first one. Because I feel like our ideas were all so big and epic and awesome, and they all use the exact same footprint, basically. that it was really like, no, I'm using that building. No, I'm using that building. But it was really cool. And I think it speaks to the fact that there is so much out there that Disney could leverage to make a better, more dynamic, more interesting Tomorrowland than we have right now. There are some great, great things about Tomorrowland, but there are some terribly even dilapidated areas of Tomorrowland now, and some underused pieces and some vacancies that have never been filled in a long, long time. So to me, this was one of my favorite ones that we did. I think it kicked it off really well.
Yeah, we were really ambitious, and I think we were just excited because it was the first one. We got our first month done, and we just wanted to, knock it out. So I'm still trying to remember all the ideas, and I can't remember, but the top 3. Those are really good.
I think one of the great things that I know that you and me, Melissa, had ideas for restaurants as part of our concepts. I don't remember if Heyzen's had any sort of restaurant idea, but I think those were some of the stronger concepts for that episode because that side of the park doesn't have a real good, like solid eatery, like the other side of the park has all of the best food, It'd be really cool to spread it out a little and bring a really good eating spot over to Tomorrowland.
You bite your tongue, sir. The Intergalactic Grill is just...
Look,
I mean, words cannot
I like a
describe.
$14 tiny hamburger as much as everybody else, but
$14 tiny dry hamburger.
Oh, I forgot the dry part. Yes, the magical dryness. I agree. And I think that is still something that side of the park desperately needs. I'm glad that they are coming through with their promise to invest this upcoming budget in existing things, with refurbishments and, kind of continuing Project Stardust, so to speak. But I really want them to do some work in Tomorrowland and bring us some new offerings. And I think a restaurant is a key element to that.
Yeah. My idea did not have a restaurant as part of my original pitch. However, I think the Axiom had so many shops and restaurants and amenities on board the ship that it would be simple to incorporate them. And the Axiom seems like those long forgotten malls in the center
Right.
of town where you have a food court and you could maybe get sponsorships again from companies like McDonald's or whatever you want, PF Chang's or whatever you're into. I don't know why those two came to mind right now, but the point is that you could have a food court with all of these other brands that could attract other people in that same sense. But the restaurant idea that Mel had, where we would be listening to Frankie sing while we were eating, I just thought was genius. I love Meet the Robinsons. Not to say that I don't like Tron, but I think at the time, just listening to Frankie sing and dance was just something that I felt would be just super cool. It would attract families, not just like the people that are into Tron. It seems like the Tron can be one of those properties that would segment out a fan base. And so it may not be as popular as the zaniness of Meet the Robinsons around in Tomorrowland. Not to say that you can't execute Tron in a really fantastic way. But, that episode was interesting because towards the end, you mentioned that somebody that you knew had talked about this really interesting idea that, honestly, since January, I have not stopped thinking about. And I can't come to a good conclusion or a good way to segment out the idea, and that was the notion of, what if we got rid of Tomorrowland altogether? And what if Main Street and Fantasyland took over Tomorrowland and those two areas simply expanded? Because, Tomorrowland, it's Tomorrowland, but it's also kind of Yesterland. And there's not much you can do to consistently keep it as Tomorrowland. Mel, you made a great point saying, you would miss it. And mainly, I think many people would miss it because it's part of the DNA of the park, right? It was one of the original lands, and although it's never been that futuristic, except for those first 10 years maybe, it does hold a special place in many people's hearts.
Yeah, the problem here is centralized around Space Mountain. You got to be able to relocate that effect, because you can't get rid of Space Mountain. I'm sorry.
Well, no, you can't.
You just can't.
No.
So it's got to move to DCA, or it's got to move to another area where it makes sense. I don't know if that it is in Disneyland or not, but that to me is the biggest problem. The other problem is part of Main Street's appeal is its quaintness, is its, what it is. If we try and expand it, I don't know what else there is to bring that hasn't been, I know the ideas of Edison Street and what was the World Avenue or whatever, I don't remember, International Street. Those ideas have been played out in various ways with Liberty Square and with the World Showcase in Epcot. I don't know if anything on those scales could be brought to an expansion of Main Street, but it would have to come with some attractions, some reason for people to explore more in that area. It might work, but that's a difficult proposition. I can easily see Fantasyland expanding because we've seen that happen in Magic Kingdom already, right?
Successfully, also.
Yeah, and it's kind of a beautiful addition to the landscape, and with some bigger attractions, and that spread makes sense. And you could kind of subsume Matterhorn and really kind of embrace it into that fantasy landscape, and that might make a little more sense. But to me, it all comes back to Space Mountain, and you can't get rid of Space Mountain.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anything I've learned from these episodes is that all you have to do is double click and then just kind of shift it around, and then you can move it to a whole new part of the park.
Yeah. Okay, Tycoon. Okay, Tycoon.
Oh, man.
Okay. So I think that there's a lot of great ideas that we talked about in this episode, but if I'm going to be subjective, I'm going to say that I think Gavin's is the most realistic this episode. I think the having Flynn's user gateway and having the tiny little city and the restaurants and everything the way that you described it, I think is not necessarily future-proofing it in Tomorrowland, but it does a much better job of giving us more longevity on the idea and the execution than some of the other things. Not that the Axiom wouldn't, but I think that as popular as things like Electronica were, and as popular as things like the Tron coaster are around the world, I think Flynn's user gateway would be the best idea really to execute. If we had like the money and said, hey, you have to make a call on one of these, I would say Flynn's user gateway would win. What do you guys think?
I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I feel like there's enough room for more than that. So I could easily see us having a Meet the Robinsons area as well, in the way that Melissa described it. Because to me, the submarines in Autopia can get the axe. You can double click on those anytime you want. They're
right.
Yes.
They've run their course, and that's a huge amount of land there that could be used for bigger and better and more interesting things. And my deal with Tomorrowland, as I said in that episode, is I don't want to focus on what we consider like the future and like actual science and technology looking forward. I want it to be steeped in science fiction, in timeless things like Tron and Meet the Robinsons, and even Space Mountain is this kind of abstract idea, but it's not rooted in like actual like rocket science and space exploration. It's just a fun fantasy in a sci-fi setting, and that to me is evergreen. It doesn't age. We're not tired of Space Mountain, and there's a reason for that. It's just great fun, and that's what I'm all about with Tomorrowland. So cool. What's next?
So the month after that, episode 245, we discussed California Adventure. And the top ideas for that episode were Melissa wanted to take over the Redwood Creek Challenge Trail and turn it into Brownstone National Park.
That's right. Yes, I remember.
We had talked a little bit about possibly bringing in the Country Bears to substitute the Billy Hill and the Hillbillies show that we are missing at Disneyland that used to be at Big Thunder Ranch. Gavin talked about converting Grizzly Peak into a Brave attraction, and that one I think spawned the most ideas from the three of us, and I think we were able to collaborate into something that would be super exciting to ride. And I wanted to basically tear down Parapixia Park and expand Disneyland all the way to Catella and Harbor. And it did pose, when I was listening back to this episode, I think when I was thinking about it.
You understood where you went wrong? Is that what you're about to say?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, it's funny. It's one thing to listen to these episodes after we're done recording them as I'm editing them, because I'm not listening to them for the sake of listening and paying attention and trying to really take in and soak in all that information. I'm making sure that we remove all the sneezes and the coughs and all the knocks of the microphone, so that it's different when I'm editing. But I think this was so great going back to listen to all these episodes this week, because it really did allow me to listen more subjectively. And you made a lot of really great points about how the expansion that I had proposed, where we tear down most of Pixar Pier or Paradise Pier at the time, or whatever it was, and expand and put Batu back there. There's still some things that I feel would still work or would have worked had they been done a certain way, like like putting Batu back there. I still think that could have worked. But the idea of expanding out and making it like an Epcot type rotunda with the other castles and the other princesses, and then the separation of Sleeping Beauty Castle and the Esplanade. Like, when I heard that back, I was like, dude, what were you thinking? How dare you? Especially with the train and the berm and everything.
Yeah, you went full on tycoon with that one.
Yeah.
You were just picking things up and moving it like one of those little slidey tile puzzles. You were just moving things around wherever you wanted.
Yeah. So I admit I went a little too far on that one. But you know what? It was still fun. I think there was a lot of great things that came out of that. One of the great things that Melissa brought up during the Grizzly Peak portion of it was we were talking about the hard transition between being in Scotland and being in San Francisco from like one turn to the next. And Melissa had proposed that you would very lightly hear bagpipes and it would kind of start ramping up as you went through. That was almost, it's essentially how you walk into Batu.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they slowly start ramping up all of those sounds, and I thought, okay, you know, we're on the same wavelength as far as, you know, how we transition and how we build some of these things, with the exception of the Epcot-esque rotunda. I think it all went pretty well. But that Brave attraction, man, you know,
that was really good.
Telling the story of Mordu the way that we described it, and adding all of the elements with Merida, and I could totally see this replacing that attraction at California Adventure.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about this one in the lead up to the this episode, and I was thinking about the DCA attractions in general. You know, we've done a couple other Armchair Imagineerings in the DCA park. And I think the things that we like to look at when we are getting creative are the attractions that remain from DCA 1.0 that still don't quite feel Disney or Disney enough. And to me, like, it was a no-brainer to focus on the attraction that was originally intended to be the icon of the park. We quickly know that was, you know, transitioned to the Mickey's Fun Wheel when they realized that was, you know, the picture spot after a certain point. But yeah, so that was my approach to that, you know, is that it doesn't feel Disney enough. It doesn't really tell a story. It doesn't really put you in a new place. It's just, you know, let's do some rafting, bro. And that's it. You know, it's like, okay, cool. It's really fun. Don't get me wrong. I love that attraction. It's really fun to ride and get absolutely soaking wet every time. But I feel like they could do more Disney style storytelling and bring us some actual magic in that attraction, which doesn't exist. And to me, with the Grizzly, the literal Grizzly Peak at the top, and, you know, the wooded setting, it is just made for the story of the characters in Brave. And to me, it almost wrote itself. Like, I didn't really have to work hard for that one, and that was why it just kind of fell into place for me. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. And then you guys came in with all kinds of like dogpile ideas, and that was cool, because I think that was one of our more collaborative episodes because of that. You know, it just that just kind of got the ball rolling, and then we came up with all kinds of ideas. And some of what we talked about, you know, having a nighttime trail in that back trail area where you could see wisps and things in the trees, some of that came to fruition with the Villains walkthrough thing that they did at the Halloween party, the Villains Grove. You know, there were elements just like we talked about. And, you know, and we talked about that whole Redwood Creek Challenge area. And I think we're due some royalties on this one, guys.
Oh, I agree. And I also really loved how you presented it. And I think that's what sparked everything to come out afterwards. Like, once you presented that idea, and it was just like boom, 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 like things were just coming together. It just worked out. Honestly, I still would love to see this happen, because that attraction is missing out. I mean, it's a fun attraction, but you're missing like the spark, just the magic of it. You know, that's what you're missing. So yeah, that episode was actually a lot of fun because it's just having like how we were just going and going, and then it just became like a beautiful thing afterwards.
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the I didn't listen back to this one, so I don't remember if we actually hit on this idea, but it struck me as a good idea this week as I was thinking about it. One of my favorite things that I thought of for that is in that area in front of the attraction where the giant wooden bear sculpture is right now. My idea was to remove that and have the big circle of monolithic stones, you know, that you walk through along that path. And so you basically enter into that circle of stones as you enter the queue, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that sets the stage. But I thought of off to the right there, it would be cool, that shop that's like Whitewater Souvenirs or whatever it is. If you could make that into the witch's hut and have like her wood carvings and stuff in there, I think that would be insanely cool.
If you would have Boo's hut there.
Right?
According to the Pixar theory timeline.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that was a fun one. I liked that one a lot.
Yeah, I would say that of that episode, that was probably the takeaway one, especially considering that there's been so many attractions that have just more of an overlay replacement than actual attraction replacement. This one's, like you said, it's kind of begging for that overlay.
Yeah.
It's already set up in such a way that it would be so simple to convert it over to that property. And I mean, Merida doesn't have much representation around the parks, and this would be a fantastic way to represent her. So yeah. Okay, episode 249, we talked about Main Street USA. Now, this episode is one of the standouts of the year, and believe it or not, it's, I think, one of the ones that I get the most comments on, the most questions on, and the most cheers about when I see listeners in the parks, when I get messages.
Wow.
Primarily because of some of the things that we presented that would replace Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and stuff. So let's go over some of the ideas. Melissa talked about bringing the citizens of Main Street over from DCA into the area.
Yep.
I still think this is a great idea because they bring so much to Buena Vista Street that they would just add a much needed element that would play off of the Dapper Dans. It would play off of, the people driving the cars around on Main Street. It would just add a little bit more of that dynamic element that it kind of almost feels like it's missing from Main Street. Like, I like the fact that it's quaint, but it's a little too quaint. Like Buena Vista Street just seems like it's more rockin'. There's so much more activity happening.
Yeah.
And that's without, the red car trolley boys now, without having all of that. We don't have Five and Dime, but we do have the Disneyland band. We've had the All-American band throughout the summer. So those additional elements and having those additional citizens walk around, I think would be fantastic for that area. You also talked about having a specific Dapper style store that would just be dedicated to that vintage style that I think would just, in that era, there was a lot of clothing that I think the Dapper inclined, let's say, would really be interested in purchasing. And I think we felt that the biggest hurdle that they would come to is if they are essentially just selling like on Etsy or something like that, that they would need to be prepared to really fork out thousands and thousands and thousands of these pieces. And that's when Disney would probably say, well, give us your piece, we'll mass produce it or something like that, right? So still a great idea, bringing essentially the Dapper Day Expo into Disneyland and just kind of making it a part of Main Street. Gavin talked about the animatronic Walt Disney had great moments with Mr. Lincoln that tells you the history of the park and talks about the influence that Abraham Lincoln had on him. He also proposed an idea where we revamp the interior of the Main Street Cinema, add a Barker, and rework the movies with the Get a Horse treatment, which is kind of like that 2/3D. And then I talked about maybe adding some Oswald cartoons to kind of mix in with the Mickey cartoons and kind of bringing Oswald into the mix, especially considering that he's no longer at California Adventure. And then, of course, the idea that made it to Epcot, right idea, wrong park, Cherry Tree Lane behind Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
This was the idea that I think a lot of people, it stuck out in a lot of people's heads, and especially when we got the announcement at the D23 Expo, that's all I could think of. It's like, whoa, right idea, wrong park. Is this how they get around paying us? How does that work?
It's ridiculous. They're just they don't want to give us our due, apparently.
So the ideas that I proposed that episode were having a Walt Disney family style museum in a certain part of the park, maybe taking over the gallery so that we kind of had like a mini version of the museum here accessible in Anaheim. I propose a 4D attraction that would kind of run the course of the Opera House and behind Main Street that would take you through the history of Disneyland, narrated by Walt Disney, so kind of a tracklist system. And then, of course, my favorite one that I pitched that entire episode was using the Void technology to give us a walk in Walt's footsteps, hosted by Walt Disney. And then Gavin threw in, well, what if it's hosted by Walt and Mickey? And they're just kind of bantering back and forth, reminding each other of well, did you talk about this? Did you talk about that? And then, just the idea of starting your tour in an orange grove, and then you kind of see the creation of the park. You see these time lapses, and at the very end, you're standing in the hub, and Walt is holding Mickey's hand, and he's like totally Mufasa-ing, pointing out towards Main Street. It's like, everything the light touches is our kingdom. And you all turn around, and then you turn around, and now he's the partner statue with Mickey.
Yeah.
And then I cried.
I still think this is something that needs to happen in the park. I have not believed in an idea more than this one.
It's a good one. It's so good, and it has that Main Street spirit and everything. And then once you said holding his hand, just walking down a puddle of emotions.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting that we ended up doing so many like virtual reality or 3D experiences because, we're dealing with the limitation of space on Main Street, right? And, my Cherry Tree Lane attraction was a complete VR attraction as well. So I think that makes sense. I think, Heyzen, your idea captured the thing that us hardcore Disneyland enthusiasts love, and that is when we go to that park, we feel it as Walt's park. We feel his presence. I, to this day, every time I leave Disneyland, look up at the window to see his lamp.
Yep.
And I'm like, later, Walt, I'll be back soon.
Dude, I thought that was just me.
No,
I do too.
I cannot leave that park without looking at the window, to give a nod. And that's why that got so many reactions, your idea, because it's that dream that all of us had, that time machine dream of, I want to go back and walk through the park with Walt, have him show me the park, and, and the things that he loves about it. And this would be our chance. And the fast passes will be gone by 8:30 a.m. You'll have to, wait in line overnight. It will be a smashing success.
Yeah. This would be one of those tours that I would be glad to give them $300 for.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is that it, I think I'm the only one that has done the Walk in Walt's Footsteps tour of us three, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. The cool thing about that tour is that you get to tour the entire park, but they go around and they focus on the spots that remain that were, existed during Walt's time, and you get to go on attractions that he was involved with. And it's really cool. But all of those attractions in one way or another have been updated or changed, or in some cases even slightly moved from where they were originally. This could show people exactly where things were and really give them the sense of this is exactly what it was like in the 50s and 60s during Walt's tenure. And to me, that adds a level that the actual tour doesn't have, that it would be just so fun to experience.
Rebecca, just throwing it out there in case you're looking for stuff to do in the next decade. Cool. So let's move on. Episode 253, we talked about Mickey's Toontown. This was also a very interesting episode because we're talking about a very small footprint in the park, which a lot of these episodes tended to have. But Mickey's Toontown, holds the distinct honor of being one of the least visited portions of the park unless you have kids. It's so out of the way, and there's not much to do there that in some ways was difficult for us to figure out what to do. But once the ideas got rolling, I think we came up with some really great things. And, my heart skipped a beat when Gavin gave out his idea for this one.
Yeah.
So let's go down the ideas here. So I talked about getting rid of Gadget's Go Coaster and creating a DuckTales hybrid dark ride / simulator attraction, just kind of going through Duckburg, taking over the Go Coaster and the Treehouse and the Magical Map to create a new Mickey and the Roadster Racers Mario Kart style type racing track, but with Disney characters. Mm-hmm. And then Mel threw out this idea that I thought was so genius that instead of throwing out banana peels and turtle shells and everything, you'd start throwing out like Dole Whips and Mickey ice cream cones and churros. And that would be the way that you get people to spin out and everything. So those were the ideas that I proposed. Mel talked about taking over City Hall and allowing you to walk into McDuck Manor, ending with a meet and greet with Uncle Scrooge, reincorporating the idea of the old Acorn Pit that used to exist in Mickey's Toontown, and creating the Money Bin. Also having the Beagle Boys kind of running around as a live stage show so people can kind of be a part of the hijinks. Also adding a full diner called Daisy's Diner, which is sorely lacking in Mickey's Toontown. Mm-hmm. And also adding the Ranger Plane photo op by getting rid of the Jolly Trolley so that there was a little bit more Rescue Rangers to go along with Gadget's Go Coaster.
Yep.
Gavin's idea was to get rid of the Chippendale Treehouse and replace it with a Mystery Shack attraction with a reverse Tower of Terror called the Weird Levator. And as soon as he said Gravity Falls, all bets were off. It's a great idea. I still think that should exist. But there's so many things that came out of that are just sorely lacking, like that Daisy's Diner thing.
Yeah.
We really, really need a good eatery back there, especially if you want to pull people to that side of the park. I think if you have that area and open up a little walkway that can somehow get you between Batuu and the back of Frontierland, I think it would just be a lot easier to maneuver and a lot more people would visit it, and something like Daisy's Diner would just flourish in that area.
I totally agree. The cool thing about this episode is we already knew that Mickey's Runaway Railway was coming. So that was going to kind of take center stage in the future of Mickey's Toontown. And I think that's going to draw a lot of people to it. But all of our best ideas don't really interfere with that, and they don't interfere with each other either. So we could absolutely have Daisy's Diner, which I think is genius and absolutely needed in that area. we could totally have what I think is your best idea here, which was the Roadster Racers idea.
Yeah.
Which also gives us another excuse to get rid of Autopia. And then the back area expansion between Mickey's Toontown and Galaxy's Edge, which is where my Gravity Falls expansion would go. None of those really impede on each other. They make it a land filled with attractions that the whole family can enjoy. And we'll get more people back there, which will spread out the crowds more throughout the park. And I think like that episode was almost not a competition. It was like, okay, yeah, you're on team Roadster Racers, you're on team Daisy's Diner, you're on team Weird Levator. Let's go make this happen. You know, like
yeah,
it was
like everybody complimented each other.
Yeah, we were like on the renovation team for Mickey's Toontown, and we each had our different projects, and it was just about getting them done. You know, like I really liked that episode because of that. It had a totally different vibe than a lot of the other Armchair Imagineering episodes, and you know, I don't know. I agree like that Mickey's Toontown needs an injection. And I think Mickey's Runaway Railway will give it some of that, but I think it can use even more than that. And that's why I love all of our ideas that came out of this.
Yeah. Tony Baxter would be proud. Or maybe not. Who knows?
But I do have to say that my Weird Levator idea was one of my favorite of the year. I really enjoyed that concept, and you know, coming up with like you described it, a reverse Tower of Terror.
Yeah, I loved it. Okay, so episode 257, we Armchair Imagineered Fantasyland. Now this had some of the most ambitious ideas, especially from me, because, you know, I tend to like to break things down and put new stuff up, and I'm not sure if this was the episode where Gavin's... No, that was the Epcot Rotunda. I think that was the DCA one, where listening back, I started laughing because I didn't realize I said it, but Gavin said something along the lines of, oh, you don't realize that you're doing this? What about this? And my answer was, I don't care. And I was like, I just want to change it. And I was like, wow, that was... Wow. So let's go over some of the ideas that we had for Fantasyland. I had talked about... Well, actually, mine's the longest, so I'm going to go to mine at the end. So,
Okay.
Gavin, you talked about getting rid of Pinocchio and creating a new Ichabod and Sleepy Hollow dark ride.
Yep.
And, of course, when people heard that, they may have been thinking, oh, no, Pinocchio, he's gone. What's up? And then... you talked about how you would move it over to Fantasia Gardens, reimagine the monorail so that it became actual transportation between the parks and downtown Disney. You'd get rid of Autopia, or as many people like to call it, Autotopia. Get rid of the submarine attraction, but leave the lagoon. And this takeover would allow you to give us a new dual Pinocchio boat ride, kind of a la Pirates of the Caribbean and kind of Guardians of the Galaxy, starting with Geppetto's Village. You dubbed it as Fantasyland's first thrill ride, because it kind of gave you these two experiences until we got to my idea. But I thought this idea was fantastic. I think that entire footprint of what the old motorboat cruise used to be, where Fantasia Gardens is, taking over Autopia, and the way that you described everything that you were putting together for this new Pinocchio and Geppetto attraction was fantastic.
Well, thank you. And listeners should know by now that I will never get rid of Pinocchio in the park.
Right? I remember when you first mentioned that and we were like, what?
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a bait and switch.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other idea that you threw out that episode was removing the magical map and that entire theater to create an Agrabah area, a whole new world, so to speak.
Yep.
Which would include Chef Genie's place for food, a flying carpet attraction that kind of takes advantage of the Peter Pan ride system, and it would kind of combine what Soarin' is. So you kind of have this combo attraction to help fly you around the world. I still think that's something that needs to happen in some capacity, because just the idea of soaring through, on a carpet, nonetheless, like, it's just such an iconic film that they're kind of missing the carpet on this one, because they're not missing. So anyway, I still think it needs to happen. The ideas that I had were, I wanted to move the Sword in the Stone to create a live show, kind of like a little villains grove where children would pull the sword and then fight the villains to get them to kind of go away. The other idea was I wanted to reimagine Phantasmic so that it was no longer at the Rivers of America, but now it would be in front of Sleeping Beauty Castle. That way we had that full Maleficent dragon at the castle. I don't know logistically how that would happen, but man, it would be so cool to see it there.
Right? We were still sold.
And of course, one of the biggest ideas that I had was, as Gavin dubbed it, the slide puzzle of Fantasyland, where I moved the Storybook Canals and Casey Jr. over to Fantasia Gardens. I would get rid of the Red Rose Tavern. I would move Pinocchio and Mr. Toad, the dance floor, and the princess meet and greet over to where Mickey and the Magical Map is, because quite frankly, I'm getting rid of that as well. And then I would create a huge castle courtyard where the walls essentially hide everything outside of the castle. The attraction would be underground, and you would be in this hybrid vehicle that would just look super boring when you board it, but using reverse projections and projections on the wall, you would be transported into each of the fairy tales and the princesses that are represented inside of Fantasyland, going from the Beauty and the Beast story to Ariel's story to Punzi's story to Moana to just everything. There's so much that we could do with that attraction, and the vehicle itself was going to be built in such a way where it would not just allow you to move around and make you feel like you were going on the water, but it would also levitate you and make you feel like you were flying, a la flying carpets, or in your tiny galleon as you were flying off to Neverland. One of the most ambitious ideas that I've had. It does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of moving. And look, I know that you guys make fun of me for double clicking and moving stuff, but look, is Dumbo in the same place where it used to be? Is the pirate ship in the same place where it used to be? What about the teacups? No, things were meant to be moved.
Yeah, that's a little different than moving the Storybook Land canal boats.
There's water where I'm putting them.
A little different. No, you're right. I mean, I think all of it could be done, but I think that would be like a 5-year project.
Oh yeah, Fantasyland would totally be shut down for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that is not something that I believe Disney would want to do.
Right.
Oh,
especially
no.
not in a park as small as Disneyland.
Yeah.
If this idea ever came to fruition, I think it would be like an attraction that they would do at like Disney Down Under when they open up like Disney Australia.
Yeah.
It has to be something that's planned and built from scratch.
Yeah.
And not something that you incorporate into something that's already existing, because the infrastructure to create such an attraction, especially in the underground part of it, so that you can keep the rise of the castle walls at a certain level and still give that illusion using the forced perspective, would just not happen. There's no way, like you said, to do that unless you shut everything down for 5 years or more. Mm-hmm. So realistically, I know this can't happen at Disneyland, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen at another park somewhere else.
Honestly, I enjoyed this episode, but I feel like it's probably the biggest collection of the least viable ideas that we came up with. Fantasyland's hard to mess with. There are some great stories about Tony Baxter and the stress he felt going into leading that project to renovate Fantasyland in 1982 and 83. And I felt some of that stress as we just played with ideas, because it's the heart of Disneyland, really. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
we came up with some fun stuff, but and I think some of those could become really cool things. But yeah, this was a tough one. I still think Fantasyland ends up being the toughest one to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you said that because I was getting to Melissa's ideas, and I think Melissa's are the most viable ideas because they were so easy to execute.
Okay.
For instance, her main idea was to remove the Red Rose Tavern and create a barbecue section, like themed
Always
after
with the
Sherwood
barbecue
Forest.
with Melissa.
Hey, barbecue is good.
No, I know, but it's so funny. I think she brings it up in like 3 different Armchair Imagineerings.
Did you ever get a chance to eat at Big Thunder Ranch?
No, remember, because it was always
that's
family
why.
style.
That's why.
That's why.
I mean, I get it. I spent the last 11 years before I moved here in the Midwest, where barbecue really exists. So I mean,
So it's just whatever to you. I get it.
It's like when people come here from New Orleans, I don't think they're wowed by the food in New Orleans Square like we are, right? It's a different thing.
That's true. That's very true. The other idea that Mel had was creating a restaurant with flora, fauna, and Merriweather.
Oh, yeah.
And there would be a lot of elements from the film. They would have their little fights and everything. And I think this would be a really great addition to Fantasyland. And it would really play into the whole Sleeping Beauty Castle element of what that area brings. So of all of the ideas, I think that one is possibly the one that we'd most likely see happen in Fantasyland, aside from tearing down everything and playing the slide puzzle game with all the attractions. And then the other idea that Mel brought was the expansion of the Alice ride, taking over the Mad Hatter shop and creating the home of the rabbit, where you would be able to go through the tiny door, but there would still be a regular door for all of us that can't crawl through the tiny door. And then there would be, and this is what I really like about this idea, there would be magical windows into Wonderland. And it would kind of be a meet and greet for Alice, the Rabbit, the Hatter, and like all the characters. But the magical windows to Wonderland, I kind of feel like would be the best part of that, because we already kind of see that on the cruise ships. Right? The cruise ships have the magical windows that kind of have the characters flying by. They're essentially screens, but it's bringing that magic that was created on the cruise ships into the parks. So there's a couple of ideas there that if we were to see any of them happen, I think Melissa takes this one.
Yeah, that's probably pretty true.
For once.
Yeah.
Okay, in episode 261, we talked about parades. Now, this was such an interesting episode because I think it was something that we weren't prepared to be so difficult to do.
Yeah.
Parade planning be hard, y'all.
Word.
And we realized that super quick. I talked about creating a tribute to old attractions where there was floats like for the People Mover, the Flying Saucers, the Rocket Rods, Autopia, and I think I even said in the episode, but Autopia's still around, and I said, not for long. I still believe that. Then I talked about possibly creating a Marvel parade. I talked about creating Legacy, a tribute to Disney animation that starred Steamboat Willie and Oswald, but each float would be concept art for each of the films that it represented. So we would get to see a 3D representation of something that Mary Blair created, or a 3D representation of something Ivan Earl painted. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that one still. I talked about creating the 104 Days of Summer Water Challenge hosted by Phineas and Ferb. It's essentially a parade of water guns that get you wet during the summer. And who doesn't like to be nice and cool in the summer?
Heck yeah.
And then I think we had some honorable mentions towards the end where I had talked about creating something called Remember Me, which was meant to be a parade of the lost characters that we don't get a chance to see in the park. But because of its significance, you both said, a Coco parade? So, no, but a Coco parade would be grand. Gavin had an idea of creating TV through the decades, where every float would represent a different decade. And I think the coolest idea and execution part of this one, as we were talking it through, was the idea of starting with a tube TV, and it kind of turned into a plasma, and then by the end it was like a cell phone or a tablet or something that you were viewing something on. I thought that was pretty cool. You talked about a Tomorrowland parade where it represented Treasure Planet, WALL-E, Meet the Robinsons, Tron, of course, because it would be the highlight of any parade that Gavin or Melissa would create, obviously.
Yep.
And then Gavin threw out a really interesting idea that was kind of, mirrored by an idea that Melissa had. You talked about creating a princess-only parade.
Yep.
I think you dubbed it the most glittery, pixie dust, most magical and colorful parade.
Full on Rococo,
existed.
candy-colored, glittery, rainbowy, princessy. Amazing. I would love it. It would be the most fabulous thing ever.
Oh, I think we all would. But then Melissa had a really great counter to that and doing a parade that was all Prince-based.
Yeah, I remember.
Except that she did exclude Prince Ali, and I think that just kind of hit you the wrong way because it kind of hurt you in a way that you never thought Melissa could hurt you. I Prince Ali, fabulous he. Yeah, so then Melissa's other idea was to create the Electronica Tribute Parade. So a bunch of elements of Tron, a bunch of elements of what we saw at Electronica, but basically a really awesome lit-up nighttime parade. Yeah, creating a parade is no laughing matter.
Yeah, I remember hearing you tell us the story of your Marvel parade and how it seemed like it couldn't be any less than a 3-hour parade.
Yes.
Because you wanted to tell the whole Infinity Saga.
Yeah. And then I remember feeling so deflated at the end of that episode when I came to the realization that parades just have to be upbeat and happy, and they have to have this great music. And at the end, I just thought, okay, so we're going to play the Avengers theme at the end, and then oh, man, that's not going to work. And I was like, well, we're scrapping that one.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, super interesting episode. The All Princess and the All Prince parade, I think, are the real standouts here. I think they just pose a really interesting concept that I don't think we've ever seen in the parks. Like, I think we've seen like princess style parades, but there's always a prince with them. There's always, some element that breaks the princess only part of it. Right? And I don't know. I think that would be a really cool parade to see. Okay, so moving on, in episode 265, we talked about New Orleans Square.
Oh, man.
It's one of our favorite areas of the park. This one, unfortunately, Mel wasn't able to join us for, so Gavin and I just kind of went back and forth with our ideas. And Gavin kind of had me at chicken and waffles with his first idea. When he talked about retheming the River Belle Terrace and making it Tiana's Place. The idea of just theming that restaurant to an IP that I just think is so much more recognizable than a generic place called the River Belle Terrace would be so successful in that area, especially when it's on the heels of New Orleans Square. I think it would have some challenges because of the proximity to Adventureland, but I mean, there's ways of kind of making it blend into the surroundings so that it just becomes its own thing.
Right.
Especially if you take one of Gavin's other ideas, and that's converting Tarzan's treehouse and let Mama Odie take over.
Oh, yeah.
If you kind of had that in that section, I mean, that's half the battle. You've already had a pretty hard transition into New Orleans Square. There's no questioning, is that Adventureland or is it New Orleans Square? No, it's New Orleans Square. That's where it starts.
Yep.
Bango Barbecue, Adventureland. Tiana's Place, definitely New Orleans Square.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you also had a couple other ideas where you talked about you wanted to retheme the Rivers of America to Princess and the Frog. Then you talked about one of the coolest ideas also that came out of this episode was an attraction based on the Rescuers, where you would walk under the track, similar to how you do it going into Toontown now, but you're taking a property that sometimes is forgotten outside of the cavalcades, and you gave it a really good home riding around on a leaf in the bayou. Some of the ideas that I threw out that episode were having in the center of New Orleans Square dueling pianos, where you would have a couple of musicians kind of playing back and forth the way that you hear some of the ragtime players do on Main Street, but they'd be dueling back and forth, they'd be quipping at each other throughout their entire set. I just think it would be just super fun to see that. A dining package on the Mark Twain, where you would get an opportunity to have dinner riding around on the Rivers of America on the Mark Twain.
Yes.
I still think that's absolutely doable, and I still think that that's something that should be offered next summer. Bring the Museum of the Weird to the Haunted Mansion area, hosted by Dr. Facilier.
Yes.
You know, have the Shadow Man just kind of go in and tell us about all these weird things that are in his hall and in his Museum of the Weird. How great would it be if it's posed as his, right?
Heck yeah.
Right.
And then the idea that would take over Gavin's Rescuers attraction would be to create a Hyperion-style theater, which would kind of have a Wicked-style show based on Dr. Facilier and telling his origin story. So you have this entire Broadway-esque show just based on Dr. Facilier. If that doesn't happen at Disneyland, it has to happen on Broadway, dude. I believe in that idea so hard that if it doesn't happen, like, I'm going to start writing that.
Yeah. I forgot about that theater show. That's a fantastic idea. It's interesting how much we both focused on The Princess and the Frog here, and how they created this film set in New Orleans, and yet it's so drastically underrepresented in the park. You know, I think we still see Facilier walking around with a fair amount of frequency, but I hardly ever see Tiana in New Orleans Square. Like there's something not right about that. That's just, like, you know, I really liked the idea that you started out with here, with my Riverbell Terrace and the Tarzan's Treehouse takeover, because, you know, New Orleans and the bayou and the swamp, I mean, it's a great segue from the jungle to the swamp to New Orleans proper. So, like, to me, that segue made sense, to have Mama Odie's tree and Tiana's place there as your segue out of the jungle into the swamp and then into New Orleans Square. I think I definitely overwrote the Rivers of America idea I had with my later Frontierland idea that I have, which I think is way stronger than this one. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But, you know, I do like the idea of this theater experience that your Facilier idea is. And I think to have another big show, kind of like the Hyperion Theater that you mentioned, and since I think every one of us at some point or another has gotten rid of the Fantasyland Theater and the Magical Map, right? So we kind of need another sit-down theater experience at Disneyland, and I think that's a great spot to do it. You could have it outside the berm, so you can have a pretty big building and do it upright, because I think what they do over at the Hyperion is so impressive. It's amazing that you can walk into an amusement park and see that quality of a show in a big, beautiful theater like that. And I think they could do it right and do it up real elegant New Orleans style.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be great. You go have dinner at Tiana's, then you go see this show to hear about Facilier. That would be an amazing, magical evening.
Well, thanks. I like that idea, too. I think I'm going to start writing it.
You should, man.
I'm just going to start writing it.
It's great.
All right. So moving on to episode 269, we Armchair Imagineered Frontierland. This,
Woo!
man, Frontierland.
This is where Heyzen hit a new level again.
Yeah. This, okay, so I'll get to that in a moment. So let's talk about the other ideas. So Mel had talked about taking over Tom Sawyer Island and adding Pocahontas and having Grandmother Willow in a show. I think that complemented the idea that Gavin had talked about when we started the episode about also creating a brand new boat ride that would kind of give the river to Pocahontas just around the river bend.
I mean, you say complimented, but it's just a nice way of saying she stole my notes. This is where the note stealing began.
This is when it starts.
Yeah, and like every episode after this, one of us steals somebody else's idea inadvertently. So this is where it began.
So there was that. Gavin talked about removing the shooting gallery and adding a themed portrait studio. And then Melissa talked about kind of having a bibbidi-bobbidi boutique style experience as well to kind of get a little glammed up and everything before you take your photos. You know, other theme parks have something like this, and I think it's very successful for them. Parks like Knott's Berry Farm, just down the road from Disneyland, have something like this. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing this with a group of friends, and I talked about it that episode that it was first proposed. I thought, this is, I don't know, like, this doesn't seem fun. And then we did it, and it was one of the funnest things I've ever done, just kind of dressing up and, like, getting into character and everything. I was like, man, we need to do this again.
Well, and the key to that idea too, though, is that it has an AR element to it, in that you'll be standing there with Woody or Jessie or other, Western characters in the Disney canon.
Right, on Mars with John Carter.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. I remember that.
Or with the Lone Ranger, or
that's right.
other people.
That's right. Or Captain Jack Sparrow. Who knows? Who knows? In any one of the 84 films he did for Disney.
Word.
Then we got to a really interesting idea that I think Gavin and I were on the same wavelength about, but I still think this idea would just kind of work so well. And it started off when Gavin talked about updating the Golden Horseshoe Review with vaudeville acts, rotating acts, having some new food. And then he kind of had me at, it's going to be like a bar/saloon. And then he said non-alcoholic, and he lost me. But I think when we were both on the same wavelength about having these vaudeville acts, I proposed that we bring the Muppets and have them do a variety show at the Golden Horseshoe Review.
Yep.
I still think that would work.
Oh, 100%. 5 stars.
Definitely.
The fact that it hasn't already happened yet is the most disappointing thing I can think of. Like, this has to happen.
Yeah. And then, of course, we get to the idea.
Your face.
So ridiculous.
That redefined ridiculous in Armchair Imagineering. And look, going back to it, again, this was one of those episodes where I kind of Epcot rotunded the heck out of this idea. Okay? And there was no boundaries, except for the fact that Gavin and Melissa kept telling me, no, you can't break everything down. And I just ignored them because this is blue sky, damn it. I'm going to do what I want. And the idea was based on these old drawings by Mark Davis for a concept that he created called Thunder Mesa River Expedition. And it was such an ambitious idea that I wanted to take some of that and incorporate a new version of the Rainbow Caverns mine train. But I wanted to do it with characters from Gravity Falls, where Grunkle Stan essentially figures out how to fake the Rainbow Caverns, and at some point you're on this attraction, Seuss trips over a cable, and he's like, whoops, sorry, dudes. And then Grunkle Stan's like, now they know that it's fake. How dare you, Seuss? And so then you're kind of going through these mines, and there's this pterodactyl that's chasing you, and look, now that I'm hearing it again, I still think it'll work. I think the biggest issue that we had with that idea was that digging out the rivers of America and
Yeah.
expanding the attraction track to what I needed it to be would require everything to go down for like 15 years.
Yeah, that was the problem. The infrastructure you wanted to create, where this ride is going through all the buildings and underneath all the frontier land and even under the rivers. It was like, that's like just start over territory. Like dig up Disneyland and start over, man.
All right, you said it.
That's gonna have to be like a third gate attraction, man. That's too much renovation.
Yeah. And again, I still think it'll work as an attraction.
Sure.
Just not in Frontierland.
Agreed. I agree.
Not in Frontierland.
Yeah. I want to talk about the Pocahontas idea I had for this one, that and that Melissa kind of we kind of combined our ideas into one giant experience. To me, that is besides the Muppets being in the Golden Horseshoe, which just should be a fact. Like we should just take that as fact that that's going to happen,
right,
and just put that out into the universe because it needs to happen. But this island idea of redoing Tom Sawyer Island or Pirate's Lair on Tom Sawyer Island or whatever we call it today, Phantasmic Stage, and retheming it and giving it new life and bringing in this American legend that is around the Pocahontas story, and bringing in the artistry and magic of that film from the Renaissance, which we all know and love. To me, that makes so much sense. Kids don't. There's nothing in the Tom Sawyer story really that resonates with kids today. I don't think. It's kind of. It's too far in the past. It's a dated thing at this point. Ironically, Pocahontas is an older story than that, but the film is what is still magical for people. And I think bringing in some new life with the Pocahontas characters and with some of those magical effects. We talked about Grandmother Willow and like a little meet and greet story time, like amphitheater on the theater or on the island somehow. The ideas of seeing like Flit up in the tree and Miko peeking out from the rocks and things like that. Just little things that you could discover on that island and still have that sense of exploration for kids, but just give it a new life with characters that they can recognize and that resonate with them. I think would be awesome, and it would get me back over there exploring a little more often too.
Yeah. It's funny, when you talked about taking over the rivers of America and creating a Princess and the Frog theme attraction, like a boat ride, I was really on board with that because I felt that it fit more with the theme of New Orleans. And we touched on this in one of the episodes where in the New Orleans Square episode, you asked me if I considered the Mark Twain more New Orleans than Frontierland, even though it's always been stationed in Frontierland. And because of that, when you proposed the Princess and the Frog idea, I thought this is a match made in heaven, right? It just goes so well with the riverboat. Like it's that same style boat that you used to see going down the Mississippi, and then you have like this element of New Orleans, Princess and the Frog. It's so great. But when I was listening back to these episodes, I realized that the charm of the Rivers of America is what Walt wanted it to represent, right? The nature part and the aspects of Native American culture that have died out in the park since its opening, and completely removing them would eliminate all of that.
Yeah.
Right? But converting it over to a Pocahontas themed attraction would not only keep it strong in the park, it would also allow Disney to have one of the strongest IPs that they have, because Pocahontas is one of the most popular princesses that exists.
Oh, heck yeah.
So she's got such a strong following, she's such a strong character that it does make a lot of sense to retheme all of that to a Pocahontas attraction. And then having that stage show with Pocahontas and Grandmother Willow would just be another element that it kind of takes you away from the rest of the park. You get to hear this cool little story in the middle of nature, even though you're in the middle of Anaheim. But like, the more that I thought about it, the more I really felt that the Pocahontas approach that you both were talking about was the much better approach than converting it to Princess and the Frog.
Yeah. I think it's a fun idea too. I just think it'd be more entertaining.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, in 275, we took on Gavin's favorite IP, Cars.
Yeah.
When we reimagined Cars Land. In that episode, Melissa talked about repurposing the Cozy Cone and changing it to be more like a sit-down style restaurant where the cones would serve as a check-in point where you would get your food and you would go sit down, and that's where you're kind of hidden away from the sun. You're kind of sitting down in the cooler elements. So if you don't want to go to Flo's, you don't want to go to one of the other restaurants, the Cozy Cone would be your new place to go instead of that being where you're served your food. I like this, especially in the summer. I think there's not a lot of places to sit around, especially because places like Flo's get super full because there's air conditioning inside. So having those additional places where you can just sit down would be absolutely fantastic. You talked about having a show with Ramon and Flo where they talk about their love story and they're kind of bantering back and forth, and Ramon's like, hey, check me out, and he's like doing his wheels and he's like hitting the switches, and Flo's like, hey, let's keep going with the story, you know. So they're kind of like bickering. I thought that was super cute. I think that's still a show that we need to see somehow in California Adventure, and it kind of goes with some of the other ideas that we had. Because Gavin brought up a really good point in some of the ideas that he was pitching, is that we need to see more of the characters in their own attractions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't see enough of that. So we wanted to see more cars out, bring Ramon out, have him do a little show similar to how DJ used to do it. Maybe have a dedicated area where he's only there all the time and that's all you get a chance to see. But having Mater, you know, at the Junkyard Jamboree, having Guido over at, you know, the Flying Tires. I keep calling it Flying Tires. At the
Rollickin' Roadsters.
At the Rollickin' Roadsters.
There you go.
You know, having these characters in their own attractions would really help serve the purpose of really feeling even more that you're inside of this world that was created. Gavin also had a super interesting idea that I never thought I would hear, but he proposed having a singing toilet. Not necessarily a singing toilet, but a talking toilet, similar to the ones that are in Japan, inspired directly by Cars 2 and Mater's trips around the world with Lightning McQueen. And I remember just thinking, oh, man, but the vloggers would be in there with their cameras. How am I going to pee in peace? And then we talked about possibly moving it outside, and it evolved into this idea that just merged really well with an idea that I had, where the toilet would have a screen and it would be giving you like commentary on this idea that I had about building this international raceway where you could build your own cars similar to the way that you used to be able to do at Downtown Disney, and you would race them. You would race for prizes. You would race for medals every day. It would just be ongoing races. And I thought, you know, it's a really cool way to kind of get engaged in that area, and it fits the element really well. Gavin also talked about creating a walkthrough where you would go into the courthouse of Radiator Springs to get your own cars or Radiator Springs driver license. You would go in there and you would see Judge Hudson, and he would, you know, make you swear in and make sure that you're going to be an honorable citizen of Radiator Springs. You would get your driver's license, and then we thought, well, that goes really well with the raceway idea, because now you have a driver license for the raceway, and just one idea built on another. Then he talked about bringing in the Planes franchise and taking over kind of that Soarin' building, expanding Cars Land all the way out into that area, and creating a brand new Planes-themed hangar where you would have planes around the world. And you would have that franchise kind of flying through, very similar to what Soarin' is now, but of course with the lovable characters from Planes.
And Cars.
And Cars.
The whole
and you would
universe.
eventually land in Cars Land. Then I talked about having a show that had Doc Hudson telling stories about Radiator Springs. Maybe you could have a stage where you're rotating characters and different characters are kind of telling you their own stories. Maybe race stories that they remember from watching Doc race or something. I don't know. You know, the opportunities of the stories that you can create for that are endless, especially if you have Mater up there telling his tales.
Yeah.
The more I thought about it, just having Mater be up there telling you one of his stories,
That would be a blast.
I know. Especially if it turned into one of those like turtle talk crush things where like he interacted with you and he's like, hey, how many of you have this and this? And everybody's like, oh, me. It's like, oh, you, red shirt over there, you know, like, and he interacts with the kids and stuff. Super cool. I love it.
Heck yeah.
I had a very similar idea to Gavin's about the Soarin' style attraction based on planes. But I think Gavin's, fit the structure of what we were creating a little bit better. I talked about having the little flying car beetles just kind of hovering around Cars Land. Because, you know, where do you go that there aren't bugs flying around?
Right.
You got to have those little beetles, man. Yeah, and then the idea that just stole my heart was Guido's pit stop coffee shop.
Heck yeah.
Where you're like, Guido, my man, my affogato. There you go.
That one had both of us sold. We were like, yes.
Yeah,
Coffee.
I think that's the most viable idea of all of them that we came up with. And it goes to an underutilized space, which is the Blue Sky Cellar, and becomes, you know, kind of an addition to the gateway to Cars Land. It's a perfect spot for people watching because that's the main avenue through the park. And we need more coffee shops.
That don't include a mermaid?
That don't include a siren. Yes, you are correct.
Oh, a siren.
Yeah. We need an independent Disneyland or Disney coffee shop that serves authentic Italian coffee drinks and Italian sodas and, you know, such. This one to me, when I think back on it, is the one I want the most to happen. We came up with a lot of really fun ideas for this area, especially like adding more of the actual cars, which I think should just happen. But yeah, I was very pleased with this idea, and I still want it to happen because the little coffee cart in the middle there by the entrance to Paradise Pixar Land of Gardens is not enough. It's good, but it's not enough. You know, we need more than that. So
we do.
This little cafe should definitely happen.
Yeah, agreed. All right. So in 279, we made our way back into Disneyland proper when we talked about reimagining Adventureland. This, I think, had one of the coolest concepts. Mel, I think we all had a similar concept in this one, just executed slightly differently. But the idea of having an escape room, it's something that just needs to happen at Disneyland.
Yeah.
So here's the breakdown of the ideas for that one. So Mel talked about plussing up the Jungle Cruise by adding more elements of smell, adding more of a 4D element so that it felt more like you were actually in this jungle. You smelled like some of the bananas when you went by the gorillas. I think when you made the joke of, you know, when you see ginger snapping, you smell ginger snaps. I thought that was cute. But then you said we should call it the Terror Cruise on Halloween. And I thought, yes. The Jingle Cruise, I think, was just one of those fun overlays that happened a few years, and then it was like, oh, that happened? Oh, we didn't get it again? Oh, well. But the Terror Cruise, I think that would be super, super fun, especially when you start seeing those beady red eyes and you start feeling the mist and you start hearing the growls and, ooh, yeah, it's good. I like it. You start hearing the hyenas and you see Scar just kind of come out, like in the darkness. Ah! Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So then you talked about having a new restaurant called Eye on the World, located at the top of the temple, which I called the Tip Top Temple. And you talked about using the ladder that you see in the queue for Indy to get up there. We talked about possibly using face recognition where you take a picture during your reservation. And when you get up there, Mara's all like, who seeks dinner? And like it tries to recognize your face to get in. I love this idea. I think the fact that you're at the top of the temple, kind of secluded from everything, is a really great place, like you said, to see fireworks. You have this prime location to kind of see the entire park, which isn't a visual that you normally get a chance to see. You kind of get a little taste of it when you're up in the treehouse right now, but that would be such a fantastic place to eat and to kind of get this experience, right?
Yeah.
I'll talk about the escape rooms after. But since we're on restaurants, Gavin also had a really great idea for a sit-down restaurant called Juniors. Juniors would be hosted by the maitre d', Indiana Jones, and it would only be available via boat. So you would have to take a boat and you would get off somewhere in the Jungle Cruise attraction, and then you'd make your way over to Juniors. Obviously, you would have your monkey brains and your snake surprise, and there would be all sorts of foods that would just surprise the heck out of you if you knew what was actually in it. But the idea of this hidden restaurant that seems to be even more exclusive and hidden than Club 33 was just a captivating idea.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a hidden restaurant, for one, but one that you also board a special boat from the Jungle Cruise dock and take this through the river, and then you exit and a safari guide takes you on another trek. So it's like you're on this adventure, and then you get to this fantastic restaurant. And then, of course, you have to adventure your way back as well. So it's just a great little bookend kind of experience that it would create. And especially at night, it would feel like you're really exploring.
There's that element of surprise. You just don't know where you're going. Then you talked about also plussing up the Jungle Cruise and the Tiki Room with more realistic animatronics, maybe adding some Lion King elements to it. I think the realistic animatronics are certainly something that is much more doable now, especially with some of the animatronic technology that we have. The Tiki Room has gone untouched for so many years now that it does need a plussing. I don't want to see it go away. I think it serves a really great purpose, and there's a really great charm to the Tiki Room that I don't want to lose in Adventureland. And I don't think we will, especially considering that the Tropical Hideaway is the companion attraction / restaurant to the Tiki Room. But I do think that animatronic technology has advanced in a way where you could take down the Tiki Room for a few months and really plus up that area, and it would just take it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
Yeah. Okay. The idea that I threw out that wasn't escape room related, we'll get to those next, was I wanted to see a sing-along where Aladdin's Oasis used to be. Unfortunately, that is now the Tropical Hideaway. But prior to that, I would have loved to have seen a stage with Baloo and Mowgli with some projection technology where maybe you see Kaa kind of wrapping around the venue and it's like this boa that's trying to squeeze everybody there. They're kind of going through the story of the Jungle Book through song, and every so often they sprinkle in other music from other properties. I just thought it would be a really fun experience and a really fun show to have, especially if they still had food in that area. But now it's a tropical hideaway, so maybe it's for another part of the park.
Maybe.
Okay, so now, the escape room clause of this episode essentially said that every one of us had to come up with an escape room without any of us knowing that we came up with an escape room. That, I think, was one of the most surprising things about this episode. So Melissa posed an idea where there is an escape room inside of the temple of the Forbidden Eye. And part of the walkthrough and part of the escape room as you're getting into it would be that you walk right behind Mara's eyes and you're looking into the attraction as the vehicles are coming towards you. And that just, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it because it's such a visual, it's a strong visual to see from Mara's vantage point.
Yeah.
Right? It's just the idea of that happening, I'm telling you, ooh. And then walking around the temple, seeing all the fire and everything, I think that would be such a cool escape room to have. So I'm so on board with this idea. Then Gavin proposed an escape room on the second floor of the bazaar, also Indiana Jones themed. And the idea of having all of these elements from the Indiana Jones movies, and you're kind of trying to crack all these codes and do whatever you have to do to get out of this room. I'm telling you, these are things that need to happen in Disneyland.
Right?
Even if they are special events, even if they are once for Halloween or whatever the case is, they got to happen. Okay? Then my escape room took a different direction. I actually wanted to get rid of Tarzan's treehouse and create the opening of the Cave of Wonders in that area because I just love the visual of the Cave of Wonders. And so my escape room incorporated a lot of the phone technology that you see at Galaxy's Edge, where they give you all of these tasks, not necessarily an escape room, but tasks that you have to do. Well, I guess that's an escape room. You do the tasks, you get through, you do things in a certain order, and certain tasks require you to have a specific amount of people with you. So it's not just like you and one other person. And at the end, you have your meet and greet with Genie, Aladdin, and Jasmine. And as Gavin said, you get to the end and applause, applause, applause.
Yeah.
And through the attraction, obviously, you see Old Man Jafar trying to, quote unquote, guide you through the escape room. So escape rooms look like something that we really want to see.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, that was the whole thing, is just adventures. So I thought it was awesome that we all came up with something in that nature. I mean, come on, Disney, make it happen. I mean, we would pay for it. I would pay for it. I'd pay $300 just to walk behind Mara's eyes. Disney.
Be careful, they're listening. They may charge you $300.
That's true.
I love the idea of all of these escape rooms. I think they all have merit for sure. I think they're completely impractical inside the park, mostly because of capacity. You just can't move a lot of people through them, but I think it could be a companion attraction to something like the Void in downtown Disney, where you maybe across that same circular area, which I guess it's now Black Tap, but somewhere in that vicinity, you could also have an escape room experience. Maybe this is what they turned the Rainforest Cafe into. It already looks like the temple. And we have a series of escape rooms in there, but you need some space, and you need something that's not going to hinder the crowd flow and things like that, and actually be able to move a capacity of crowds through. And escape rooms just don't do that. They don't do volume. So I love these ideas. I just don't think they'll ever happen inside a park. But I think they could go outside the park. For me, the real interesting things we came up with here were the restaurant ideas. having some more Indiana Jones experience in there, because Indy is, to me, Indiana Jones defines adventure. Like, it is the number one like adventure film franchise, like bar none to me. And so more Indy makes more sense, and I love it. And of course, all of our ideas of just kind of bringing up the existing attractions to contemporary technology levels, modernizing, plussing the animatronics, adding some new effects to the Tiki Room and the Jungle Cruise. All of these things will do nothing more than add magic to an already incredible land. So yeah, this one was an interesting one for sure. I was surprised with how much we came up with for one of the smallest lands, and certainly one of the most landlocked lands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're finally at number 11, which was last month's Armchair Imagineering episode, and that was 283, Critter Country.
Oh, yeah.
Critter Country is also one of the episodes that I received the most messages about and the most comments about, primarily because of Gavin's takeover of all of Critter Country, which we'll get to shortly.
It's my most Heyzen-esque episode.
Exactly. He took the Heyzen route and reimagined everything.
Yep.
So Melissa had talked about plussing up the area in front of Pooh Corner, which is the exit of Splash Mountain. And she talked about adding some mirrors with the country bears to bring that element back into the area, bringing some lockers, which are sorely needed there because we just don't have any, and warming stations so that when you get off of Splash Mountain, you're not absolutely freezing. Not a problem in the summer, but in other months, it does get a little chilly, or if you ask most Californians, when it gets under 70, it's freezing temperature.
Guilty.
Then I talked about creating a meet and greet where Pete guides you through the forest, and you eventually get to meet Elliot, who just kind of appears from nothing, similar to how he does in the movie Pete's Dragon. The other idea that I proposed was kind of a spin-off of the Frontierland idea and renaming the Country Jamboree portion of the land, calling it the Critter Jamboree, hosted by the Muppets, with special guests, the Country Bears! Yay! It would have a rotating stage with the riverboat scene and just different elements of the Country Bears, different things for the Muppets. And if we don't get the Muppets in Frontierland, I think this is the kind of the next best place to see them. Mm-hmm. And then adding some elements of the Country Bears would also kind of bring that nostalgia hit to everyone. But, of course, the star idea of this episode was Gavin's idea to take over all of Critter Country, formerly known as Bear Country, formerly now known as Critter Country because now it's known as Sherwood Forest. And it would allow you the opportunity to walk into Nottingham. The Hungry Bear would be repurposed into the Stoodalali, and the maitre d' would be Little John. Best pun of all of the Armchair Imagineering episodes right there. If there was a certificate and or award for that one, you just won, Gavin. The new attraction replacing Winnie the Pooh would now be from the point of view of Skippy the Rabbit. So it would be Skippy's Big Adventure, kind of going backwards from what we see Pooh, it ends with his birthday, but this would start with Skippy's birthday and kind of work its way backwards. And then, of course, the retheming of Splash Mountain to Robin Hood's Great Escape. At the very top of Splash, you would see the castle. It would be hidden with a bunch of trees so that you can't see it from the rest of New Orleans Square, so that from the Haunted Mansion, from other areas of New Orleans, you don't see it, and you only truly see it from within Sherwood Forest. I think of all the ideas that we've had, this is one of the most cohesive ideas that just fits so well in the element that it was designed for, and I love it. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the listeners really connected with this idea as well, especially considering that it's a property that's loved by a lot of people and isn't represented at all,
Right.
really, inside of
Right.
any of the parks.
Yeah, I wanted to give Robin Hood some love, and I may have gone a little overboard, but it just kept snowballing. You know, it kept rolling into one after another of those areas of Critter Country, and it just seemed to make sense that it could all be themed on Robin Hood because it's such a rich landscape. You know, the legend of Robin Hood itself is so iconic, and Disney's treatment of it with anthropomorphizing all these forest creatures and, you know, putting that amazing music to it, which is country music. So it kind of gives a little bit of an homage to the country heritage of that area.
Yep.
And I don't know, it all just kind of seemed to work for me. And you know, we've talked about the topic of Song of the South on this show, and as careful as we want to be with our words about it, it's just a problematic topic. So just taking that topic out of the park seemed like a smart move to me. You know, Robin Hood is beloved and, you know, as far as I am aware, uncontroversial. And so I think it's an upgrade on that level. And yeah, I just had fun with that one, man, because I am a passionate fan of that movie. I think it is the single most underrated Disney film of all time, and I stand by that. I think it is quite perfect, and I wish it was in the park.
This
Man.
one, I think you had like the most fun, even with like the puns.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What is it?
even with the beer puns.
The stir hiss.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was awesome. If anything, that has to happen. I mean, the presentation, all of it. I mean, dude, A++. It was good.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, man. So that's it. That's all 11 Armchair Imagineering episodes. And even in this episode, we got a chance to Armchair Imagineer our Armchair Imagineering ideas.
Heck yeah.
Because we still had a chance to go back and revisit, make some modifications. Like I said, it was really great having a chance to go back and listen to them because it showed me how insane I can be. It also showed me how even Gavin can fall into the trap of just completely not necessarily demolishing, but completely redoing something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there was so many great ideas that came out of this. I'm looking forward to everything that we come up with in 2020. This idea, I've just been so happy with it. Gavin, tip of the hat to you, sir, for coming up with this concept and rolling out this Armchair Imagineering part of the podcast.
Thanks, dude. It's my favorite part of the podcast for sure. I like when we get creative and we start brainstorming together. So it's something that should definitely continue. I wanted to ask you guys, what is the number one thing that we didn't Armchair Imagineer this year that you want to definitely Armchair Imagineer next year?
Ooh.
I know I've got a couple on the table that I want to do. I've said it before. I think we should just go crazy and Armchair Imagineer Disney Plus because I have some ideas for programming. And then I think it's high time we tackled Hollywoodland and finally decided what's going to happen there. They already took our advice and created a beautiful new facade for PhilharMagic. So thank you, Imagineering. We will update you with our addresses so that those paychecks can make it to us.
Direct deposit is fine, by the way.
Yeah, either way. But that to me is the big challenge of DCA. So I think we should do that one for sure.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what begins to pan out once Avengers Campus is open, because Hollywoodland is one of those areas where they kind of are using it as a fallback for Marvel. And so once Avengers Campus is open, it's going to be interesting to see what a ghost town it becomes.
Yeah, it's going to, for sure. Speaking of new lands, I think next year sometime after we've had Rise of the Resistance for a little bit, we should just go ahead and jump into Galaxy's Edge and start coming up with new ideas.
Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
tons of room.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've shared some of our ideas with all of you now as far as what we want to talk about in 2020. We've mentioned it before, but now we want to hear from you. What are some of the things that you want us to talk about in 2020? And even if they don't become Armchair Imagineering episodes, they might fit into like a monthly segment of other episodes that, we can talk about. So join the conversation. Tell us what you want to hear about over on Instagram, Facebook, or on Twitter. Just search for Podketeers. You can also leave a comment on the blog post for this episode over at podketeers.com/288. And we'd love to hear from all of you. If you want to send us a quick voice message, if you don't want to type anything up, feel free to use the voice memo on your phone and then send that audio file to comments@podketeers.com. You may even hear that comment on a future episode, which we've done before. Yeah, that's it. I think that's going to wrap up the episodes for 2020. I wanted to send a quick shout out to a few people on Instagram. I want to send a quick shout out to Disney Lover 1216. When we were talking about the Armchair Imagineering episodes, she responded that the animatronic Walt and the Cherry Tree Lane ideas were some of her favorite this year. Drew PDX said that adding Pocahontas to the canoes was one of his favorites and that he loves the Armchair Imagineering episodes. Amazing Brian commented Critter Country or Zootopia. I still think that we didn't really mention it because we talked about some of the top ideas, but Zootopia, was one of those ideas that we proposed for Critter Country. But man, that Robin Hood idea, dude, just bringing Sherwood Forest, that just trumped everything. Just
Agreed.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for listening, as always. I know we've said it before, but, we do this podcast because we love talking about Disneyland, and whether we were recording it or not, we'd still be talking about it with each other. The coolest part about this is that we get a chance to talk about it and then share our thoughts with all of you. So without you, this podcast wouldn't exist. So we just want to thank you for an amazing 2019, an amazing decade that was the teens of the 2000s as we're entering 2020 next year. We want to say a huge thank you to the FGP Squad, because without the FGP Squad, these episodes would have ceased to exist quite some time ago. I won't get into the whole story. I've talked about it before, but, the FGP Squad essentially saved the podcast from its demise several years ago. So the FGP Squads hold a very special place. I'm getting choked up in my heart. So huge thank you to everyone on the FGP Squad. FGP Squad is, of course, our podcast, Fairy Godparents. And if you like the podcast and you want to be part of the FGP Squad, you can find more information on how you can sign up for a one-time contribution or a monthly contribution via Patreon by going to podketeers.com/FGP. I know we've been talking about doing a live stream for you guys, and I just want to say I'm sorry, and thank you so much for your patience. As you guys know, we've gone through some changes in our family. It was a really tough few months leading into this holiday season with my grandfather passing away and everything. And it's been kind of difficult to juggle everything and still be able to do a lot of the things that I want to do. It wasn't until this week that I caught up with some mailing that I had to do for products that people purchased, for auction items that people purchased. So to everyone that, that fell into those categories, I just want to say thank you so much for your understanding. I really appreciate you. Team Boat Willie did amazing this year. I can't thank all of you enough for all of the help with our fundraisers for Chalk, for Walk for Hope. Next year, we want to keep doing that. Hopefully, we are able to add a couple more charities next year. We talked about possibly doing a charity toy drive for Christmas this year. Again, unfortunately, with everything that was happening, it kind of shifted some plans around, but that's still an idea that we want to execute on next year. And we just want to keep building it. Team Boat Willie is something that all three of us have been very passionate about in our own ways, helping out different organizations. Even if it's not a big effort like we've done with Chalk or Walk for Hope, little things like Gavin donating a portion of the proceeds of all of the things that he sells on his website, or you can also find them by going to podketeers.com/gear. Every piece of art that he sells, he donates a portion of that to the Orangewood Foundation or a different charity every year. So Melissa also has different organizations that she supports with the things that she sells, and all of us, I think we just love what we do. We're thankful that we're in a place where we can help other people, and we're just going to keep doing it. We're going to keep growing, and with your help, we can help a lot more people. I think that's all I got. You guys got anything before we wrap up this episode?
Just wanted to wish everybody happy holidays, Feliz Navidad, happy Hanukkah, joyous Kwanzaa, everything, because it's all going to start after this episode.
Yeah.
Or actually, Hanukkah's already started, so continue the party.
Yeah, keep it going.
There you go.
Yeah,
Gavin?
I ditto all that. Just sending out good vibes to everybody. The thing that I love about Podketeers is that we're all about the positivity, about the magic that we all celebrate in this crazy, weird, fantastical machine that is Disney. And the fact that we can all escape into this and, just have fun together is what it's all about. So happy holidays to my podcast fam.
All right, so with that, it's time to wrap up this episode. It's the last episode of the year and the last episode of the decade.
Woo!
So until next year, keep dreaming, keep moving forward, and always remember to pass on the magic. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Bye.
Made you look.